If I could please ask everyone to make sure your phones are set on silent. I appreciate it. Thank you. I'm sorry, you couldn't hear that? Eric, is it better? Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Sorry. Okay. A reading from Albert Einstein. Strange is our situation here upon earth. Each of us comes for a short visit, not knowing why, yet sometimes seeming to divine a purpose. From the standpoint of daily life, however, there is one thing we do know. That we are here for the sake of each other, above all, for those upon whose smile and well-being our own happiness depends, and also for the countless unknown souls with whose fate we are connected by a bond of sympathy. Many times a day, I realize how much my outer and inner life is built upon the labors of others, both living and dead, and how earnestly I must exert myself in order to give in return as much as I have received and am still receiving. I have two brief readings that Leah herself picked out and asked that they be read at today's ceremony. You ask how old I am today. I know, but wouldn't care to say. But if you ask how young I'm going to be, that answer I'll give happily. Count your nights by stars, not shadows. Count your life by smiles, not tears. And with joy on every birthday, count your age by friends, not years. That's from James Freed. The theology in this next reading is uncharacteristic. God saw that her footsteps faltered, that her heart grew weak and faint. God marked that her strength was failing, and God listened to each complaint. God has bid her rest for a season, for the pathway had grown too steep. And folded in fair green pastures, God giveth our loved one sleep. Weep not that her toils are over. Weep not that her race is run. God grant that we rest as calmly when our work, like hers, is done. Till then, we would yield, though with sadness, our treasure to God to keep, and accept our faith's assurance. God hath given our loved one sleep. We have come together today to honor the life and to mourn the loss of Lelia Kamionkowski. May her memory be for a blessing. Even as we grapple with the pain of her physical absence, we recall the gift of her presence in our lives. We are thankful for all that was good and true in the way that she lived, and for the precious memories that will endure among all those who knew and loved her. It is a daunting and ultimately impossible task to attempt to capture the depth and complexity of a human soul using the tools of the written or spoken word. This would be true even if one were to write a book-length study of a person's life. And how much the more so in this minuscule moment of time we are given, this minuscule amount of time, we are given at this poignant and difficult moment. And yet we are driven by our human need for meaning and continuity to make the attempt nonetheless. So let us acknowledge that today is the merest beginning of the process of distilling the legacy that Lelia leaves to us, a process that will continue over the coming weeks and months, and for many of us, last far into the future. Reflections on Leia's life will be offered today from several different sources. I will begin with a general overview of Leia's life gleaned from conversation with her family and memories from members of Kol Halev. And then we'll hear from her younger son Daniel, who will share reflections representing her immediate family. This will be followed by her daughter Tamar reading a note that was sent by Leia's niece Amalia on behalf of the Israeli branch of her family. Lelia Kamionkowski, or Leia, or Leah, as she was more well known for much of her life, was born on October 9th, 1933, in what was then a very small Argentinian town. I'll probably get this pronunciation messed up, but called San Miguel de Tucumán. She was the younger of two children, a bit more than 2.5 years junior to her beloved older brother Oscar. Her parents, Shulam and Matilda, had each come to Argentina on their own as teenagers, a decade or so prior, as part of an extended family exodus from the Eastern European borderland that was sometimes part of Poland and sometimes part of Russia. Like so many Jewish immigrants of the time, they were aiming to make new lives for themselves in the new world, in a place that would be free from the threat of anti-Semitic violence and discrimination that was so prevalent then in the old country. For most of the Jewish immigrants who settled in this and other parts of Argentina, their Jewish identities were strongly bound up with Zionism and much less connected to the religious dimensions of Jewish tradition. Leia very much took this perspective to heart as she was growing up and identified with the goal of eventually moving to Israel. Even though this commitment was strongly present within her family, her own internalizing of it and her desire to act on it, especially in her adolescent years, at times created some tension within her family, particularly with her father. One summer as a teenager, Leia signed up to participate in a local Zionist camping experience that was meant to prepare young people to make Aliyah. It was a co-ed camp, and she had to get her father's permission to attend. Her father was not too pleased with the idea of sending his teenage daughter off to gallivant at this camp in what he likely imagined was not going to be an overly supervised setting. So he initially refused to give his permission. But Leia, as many of us know, was not one to take no for an answer when she had her mind and heart set on something. So she decided to bring some pressure to bear by engaging in a hunger strike and by halting all communication with her father. In this battle of wills, Leia eventually won out, and she achieved her goal of attending the training camp. Leia's family on her father's side had a strong aptitude for analysis and mathematics, which was a gift that Leia and her brother both received. Leia would eventually undertake an educational and career path that made use of those abilities, but as a young woman, that was still many years and many experiences into the future. After finishing high school, Leia decided to move to the big city of Buenos Aires to attend college and pursue a career as a dietitian. Because there were no student dorms to speak of at that time, Lelia found herself living, along with a number of other female students, in a local convent, where part of the agreement was that she would have to attend church services every Sunday. It was during these years that she met Lelia Kamionkowski at a student Zionist gathering on campus, the man she would soon marry and with whom she would have her three wonderful children. Mario was working towards his medical degree when they met, and upon completing it in 1957, Lelia and Mario were married. It didn't take long before Mario's medical career brought the two of them to Cleveland, where they quickly began to settle into their new life, with Mario working as a physician and Lelia as a dietitian. Besides her work, Lelia was intent on learning the skills that would support her ability to further integrate into their new society. So she enrolled in a series of adult education classes held at John Hay High School, in which she worked on improving her English and honing her typing. The life of the young couple changed dramatically in 1963, when they welcomed their first child, Tamar, and only 2 years later, their second child, Mark, joined the family. For Lelia, the experience of becoming a parent was one of unparalleled blessing and meaning, and this sensibility remained strong and present for her throughout the rest of her life. Not long after Mark was born, Lelia and Mario felt drawn towards realizing the dream they had both been raised with of moving to Israel. So they pulled up stakes in 1966 and joined many other members of their respective families who had made the same decision over the prior decade, including Leia's parents and brother. As it turned out, it was a fateful moment to have made that choice, and they arrived just in time to experience the trauma of the run-up to the Six-Day War, followed by the jubilation of a decisive military victory and the transformation of the country that came in its wake. For reasons that have never been totally clear to Leia's children, something shifted for their parents during the year or so they lived in Israel. And by the end of 1967, they had decided to move back to Northeast Ohio and to the life they had already spent many years cultivating here. They initially lived in Warrensville Heights, where Tammy attended preschool and kindergarten, but then moved for the 69-70 school year to Shaker Heights, which coincided with the birth of their third child, Daniel. At this point in her life, Lelia invested her substantial energies and skill into being the model of a traditional housewife. She focused on caring for her growing children, managing the household, and supporting the career of her husband, which included the hosting of many elegant parties for Mario's medical colleagues. However, this focus began to shift as their children got a little older and more self-sufficient. By the late 1970s, Lelia was feeling a call to go back to school. Growth and learning had always been central values in her life, and she was finally discerning for herself how to align a talent for math that she'd always known she'd had with a new career path that would be meaningful and fulfilling for her. So, in her late 40s, she made the life-changing decision to enroll in the Bachelor's of Accounting program at Notre Dame College. She loved all these new educational opportunities, and she was particularly fascinated with algebra and a multidisciplinary class she took called The Ascent of Man. Mark happened to be taking algebra at the same time, and the two of them would often study together, sharing the enjoyment of mathematical discoveries. She would also, a few years later, teach Daniel how to understand and love her favorite branch of arithmetic. In the context of being a student again, some of Leia's core traits came to the fore in very clear ways, such as the depth of her self-discipline and the strength of her commitment to the idea that if something was worth doing, it was worth doing well. Lelia got straight A's all through her time at Notre Dame. Once, she found out that she was getting an A- in one of her classes, which did not make her happy. So she met with the professor of that class and asked if she could retake the final exam. And, as often happened in other areas of her life, her requests were difficult to refuse. Notre Dame, being a Catholic institution, had a requirement for every student to take at least one credit of religious studies before they graduated. For Lelia, this was not the first time she had encountered a religious requirement under a Catholic umbrella. So she came up with a plan that would allow her to fulfill the requirement in a way that would be most meaningful to her. And she asked for permission to do her religious studies class at the Cleveland College of Jewish Studies. Yet another request that was granted. And in the process, she initiated what was to become the next intellectual passion that she embraced, the study of Jewish history, religion, and culture. Leia's commitment to quality, of course, did not end with the completion of her bachelor's degree. The next big threshold for her was to pass the CPA exam. She began to study for the exam a full year before she was to take it, methodically going through the various categories of problems she would be asked to solve. Not surprisingly, all the preparation paid off, and she ended up with a perfect score on the exam. With her CPA certification in hand, it did not take her long to find a position with a firm that was excited to find someone like Lelia to add to their team. A person who was both excited about the work and dedicated to maintaining a high level of professional excellence in all that she did. All of these positive developments in Leia's life played out in a more complicated and difficult way in the context of her marriage. As she became more of her own person professionally, she sought a more balanced approach between focusing on her own career and supporting that of her husband. This was a shift that Mario did not welcome, and by the mid-1980s, Lelia and Mario decided to divorce. In answering a question recently about identifying the happiest times in her life, Leia's first response was to reflect on the joy of becoming a parent. But her second answer revolved around the happiness she discovered after the divorce from Mario and the realization of how satisfying it was to live on her own. Another great source of joy in Leia's life was certainly the love and importance she attached to her family in general. The foundation of this value for her, in addition to her own children, was her profound connection to her brother Oscar, with whom she spoke at least once every week. It was a relationship that could be defined both as a sibling and as a best friend. And as those she loved most in the world in time came to have families of their own, Leia's core circle of love and connection expanded in turn. That was equally true of Oscar's wife Olga and their own children and grandchildren, as it was for the spouses of Leia's own children and the grandchildren that followed. Her oldest grandchild, Tali, was born to Tammy as a single parent in 2001, and some years later was joined by her sister Alex, who arrived in 2013. Stacy and Reuben came into Daniel's life in 2007. Rebecca and Mark were married in 2009, and their children, Isaac and Ada, were born in 2012 and 2015, respectively. For Lelia, her family was a constant source of joy and pride, as well as being a powerful touchstone of gratitude for her when going through difficult periods in her life. The love that Lelia carried with her in her life did not stop flowing at the boundary of her family. She was a person who naturally and easily formed deep connections with others, and she had numerous close friendships that she maintained over the course of many years with people she knew from each stage of her life. Even people that she knew more casually very often felt a great degree of fondness for her and counted her as someone it was always a pleasure to see and to speak with. She was truly a people person, and yet she was also someone who had a natural bent towards introversion. This virtuous paradox was one of many that Lelia seemed able to embody. Another was her penchant for elegance while remaining totally down to earth. She appreciated beauty in all its forms: clothing, home decor, fine dining, to name a few. Even her handwriting was elegant. Anyone who ever had the pleasure of taking a meal at Leia's table will testify to the care that she took to create a feast that was as much a delight to the eyes as it was to the taste buds. Lelia exuded kindness and compassion, yet she could also be a tough cookie when circumstances called for it. She knew how to negotiate at a car dealership, and not too long ago, when she found out her credit card number had been stolen, she had to be talked out of going to confront the thief by her children after she discovered the address that one of the stolen items had been sent to, in Beechwood. Lelia was generous with her time, with her attention, and with her financial resources, but at the same time, she was not showy. She didn't need or seek out recognition, but rather found her satisfaction in the help she was able to offer both to her family and her community. In her own life, Lelia had a great appreciation for order and the absence of clutter. But when her multi-generational family would come to stay with her for a holiday or a life cycle event, bringing some friendly chaos along with them, she easily let that preference go in order to enjoy the opportunity for family connection and celebration. One other paradox to acknowledge was her fierce intellect and strongly held opinions in combination with her desire and ability to hear what others had to say and to be in generative dialogue with those who may have had a different perspective than hers. And this leads us directly to Leia's love affair with Reconstructionism. Almost anyone who's known Lelia over the past 30 years has some sense of the transformative impact that her discovery of Reconstructionist Judaism had on her life. Many of us attending today, I suspect, have had the pleasure of hearing Lelia tell the origin story of her connection to Reconstructionism, and those of us who are very fortunate have had more than one opportunity to hear her share that narrative. On this poignant day, it feels important to revisit that story one more time because of how powerfully her spirit comes through in its telling. I will try to do it justice, but of course no one could tell this story in the way that Lelia could. Lelia often started this story by sharing the deep frustration she had felt for many years after arriving in the U.S. with the absence of accessible meaning and connection that seemed, from her perspective, to pervade so many established congregations. I think she really felt at the time that she was in a kind of spiritual wilderness. But a big turning point came on a trip she took to California in the early 1990s. While visiting Berkeley, she chanced upon a Jewish bookstore with the intriguing name of Afikomen and decided to go in and have a look. Once inside the store, she encountered a very traditional-looking bearded Jewish man behind the counter and was pleasantly shocked to discover that he was both knowledgeable and enthusiastic in response to her question regarding a feminist-oriented Haggadah for Passover. Unable to contain her curiosity, she asked this man how it was that he could look so traditional and yet sound so progressive. He responded that he was a Reconstructionist rabbi, and that within Reconstructionist Judaism, people were encouraged to embrace the elements of Jewish life that were meaningful to them, wherever they might fall on the spectrum of traditional to contemporary. This encounter sent Lelia off on a quest upon her return to Cleveland to find some glimmer of Reconstructionist Judaism in her own city. After a few false starts and unhelpful suggestions from people who weren't sure what she was talking about, she finally got connected to Rabbi Jeffrey Schein, the founding rabbi of Kohelev, who invited her to attend the Tashlich ceremony of a still very new Reconstructionist fellowship, or chavurah, that was being held at a bridge on one of the Shaker Lakes on Rosh Hashanah afternoon. That was the first experience Lelia had with Jewish ritual through a Reconstructionist lens. The combination of using a traditional ceremonial form while infusing it with spontaneous contemporary relevance grabbed her immediately. From that day forward, Lelia invested her energy, her care, her insight, and her commitment into putting down spiritual roots within the Reconstructionist movement and to help grow, deepen, and sustain what was then the Reconstructionist Chavurah of Cleveland and has been Kol Halev for the past 18 years. Lelia was not technically a founding member of our community, but anyone who joined within even months of her becoming a member would be surprised to hear that. She truly jumped in with both feet from the very first, and the impact of her care and commitment was felt by everyone in both tangible and intangible ways. She read everything she could that was by or about Reconstructionism's founder, Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan. And she found in his writings a spiritual mentor and fellow traveler who affirmed her conviction about the importance of grounding one's spiritual and religious life in an intellectually authentic way, and also within the web and weave of community. She availed herself of just about every adult education course and opportunity that was offered both within our community and also within the wider Jewish community. And it wasn't long before she herself was stepping into teaching roles as well. At the same time that she was getting involved with the Chavurah, she was also pursuing a master's degree in Jewish studies at the Cleveland College of Jewish Studies, which she completed, as she did so many other things, with flying colors. It isn't possible within the constraints of today's ceremony to list the many and varied roles that Lelia played over the past 3 decades within Kol Halev. But a few of the most notable would include her service as president and vice president of our board, her longtime membership and active participation on our community Chesed or Loving Kindness Committee, our membership committee, our adult education committee. She also organized and helped lead many adult education activities over the years. And she was for years one of our most active leaders of Shabbat Torah study, really up until just a few months ago. Besides this already significant list, she was always among the first to offer her home to host events such as committee meetings, adult education sessions, and of course our annual new and prospective member brunch. It's also important to note that she spent many years as a member of the National Board of the Reconstructionist Movement and brought the same level of commitment and energy to that context. And one last thing to mention about the gifts Lelia brought to Kol Halev and to Reconstructionism more generally, but perhaps in a slightly more indirect way. Tammy, I hope you won't mind me saying this, but I have to wonder if our movement would have had the wonderful benefit of you serving as a longtime faculty member and ultimately dean of the Rabbinical College had your mother not laid the groundwork with you through her tremendous passion for the value of what Reconstructionism had to offer the Jewish world. Through all of Leia's many roles within our community over the years, she really had a short list of overarching aims: to connect people with one another, to connect people with Reconstructionist ideas and values, and to help build a community defined by interpersonal support, growth, and lifelong learning. She did this through often being the first person within our community that potential new members would meet. She did this through seeking out the opportunity to have meaningful conversations with as many of her fellow members as she could. And she did it through being available as a listening ear to anyone who might be in need, and through sharing her wisdom with others when they sought it out. Along the way, she developed many close friendships within our community, all of whom, including myself, along with her loving family, feel a profound sense of loss at this moment. For many, Leah was truly the heart of our collective aspiration to be a voice of the heart. In the ancient rabbinic text, Ethics of the Fathers, there's a list in chapter 5 of the qualities that define each decade of life. Towards the end of that list, the definition of reaching the age of 80 is called by the rabbis special strength. That definition certainly applied to Leah, who seemed as energetic at that age and well into her 9th decade as she had ever been, much to the amazement and delight of everyone in her life. The Mishnah was certainly on target with that definition. But for the age of 90, the rabbis use a very different phrase. They call it the age of a bent body. And while it's true that Leah's 90th and the beginning of her 91st year brought unprecedented levels of physical challenge to her life, the rabbis' attempt to sum it up in such a narrow and superficial way really misses a tremendous amount of who she continued to be during this very difficult period. She continued to invest in deep interpersonal connections, both with those whom she'd known for years and with those she had just met in the context of her move last March to Judson, and even with people who came into her life in the context of these past couple of months in hospice care. She continued to reflect on profound questions of meaning, and she continued to express deep gratitude for the life she had the opportunity to live. I would like to conclude with Leah's own words, excerpted from her ethical will that she wrote about a quarter century ago, and which she shared with her children. She wrote the following: old age and the inevitable end of our lives are not to be feared if you have lived good lives. I have no complaints. I have been blessed with wonderful children and good friends and interesting experiences. We all have some difficult times in life, but all in my life, the good far outweighs the bad. I don't think anyone could have said it better. Leah, we are so grateful to have been part of the very good life that you lived. We will miss you, and we know that your memory will be an ongoing source of blessing in our lives. Zichronech behechlet tihiyeh livracha. At this time, I'd like to call up Leah's children, and Daniel will share some reflections.
Hi. So I've started and restarted this eulogy several times. It's so hard to imagine anything in words that could do justice to the ineffable grace that my mother, Lelia Kamionkowski, brought to the world. Do I talk about her kindness, her enormous capacity for love, her toughness and independence, her singular intellect, the way her smile could light up a room? Simply stated, and I know that people say this, for eulogies in general, but she was the most remarkable person I've ever known. The most remarkable person I've ever known. And those of you who knew her, she was one of the most remarkable people you've ever known. And I know this because you tell me this. And you tell me this with the words that you use to describe her, and with the light in your eyes when you talk about her. And if you're here, not because you knew her, but you're here as a friend to Tammy or Mark or myself, you should know that it's very likely that whatever it is about us that you love and admire is a legacy of the loving and wise parenting that she gave to us. The thing is that when I think about the eulogy she would want me to give, I think about the gift that she had for telling people what she knew they needed to hear. And although I lack that gift, I'm thinking that she would want me to focus less on praising her and more on celebrating her life and learning from the lesson of her life. Because she truly mastered the art of living, and there's so much to learn from her example. No one can ever know what it feels like to be someone else, and sometimes it's hard enough to even know what it feels like to be ourselves. But I have a pretty good guess that most of the time what it felt like to be Lelia Kamionkowski was grateful. And not just because she had much to be grateful for, but because she had the wisdom to know what to be grateful for. I know that she also felt connected to her family, including her family in Israel, to whom she will always be lovingly known by her childhood nickname, La Loli. She felt connected to her beloved community of friends and her extended family at Kol Halev. She felt connected to those that she met in the course of her day-to-day life, and even in those connections, she had a way of truly seeing people's inner spark and honoring their dignity as humans. And she felt connected to her Jewish heritage and the principles of social justice that it had instilled in her. I believe that so much of the quality of my mother's inner life was tied into these two ideas, gratitude and connection. But my mother's life also teaches us how to meaningfully be in the world, because one of her most remarkable traits was her intense commitment. For her, gratitude led to a strong compulsion to return the favor to the universe, and connection was something that she worked to nourish, from small everyday acts of kindness to leadership and service in the broader world. And because she had a strong drive to excellence, as you heard from Steve's words, there was something very deliberate in the way that she took action in the world. And because of that, she was a person who truly made a positive impact in the lives of others. It's very overwhelming to think of the world without my mother. But I'm not sure that we have to. I see her everywhere in this room, and I feel her presence every moment that I pause to think about how incredibly lucky I am to be her son. And there, even in the immense grief that I feel, I can't help but smile. So try to open up a little crack in your grief to let yourself feel the gratitude for your connection to her. And I think that would make her happy.
This is a short note from our cousin Amalia in Israel. And before I read it, she's not just our cousin in Israel. My mother and her brother spoke every single week of their lives. And every single time they got on the phone, I would hear my mother say, Oscarcito, with like such joy. And he did the same. They were filled with so much love. And that relationship of love really was like a fountain that swept over all of us. So I know my family in Israel is watching and is with us. And I wanted to say, אנחנו מרגישים שאתם איתנו. We feel very much that they're here. So this is from Amalia. We would have so wanted to be there with you today in this sad and special moment of saying farewell to Leia, or La Loli, whom we love so deeply. Olga says she's known and loved her for so many decades and reminds us of Oscar's deep love and attachment to her throughout her life. Loli was indeed a very special, unique woman, kind, loving, generous, and at the same time firm, opinionated, and independent in her thoughts and her actions, a true leader. She was the hearth of the family in the deep sense of the word. For me, Amalia, she's always been an inspiration. She was old, my parents' generation, yet I could talk to her about anything, and she'd understand and would be able to relate and give back meaningful thoughts. She was so rare, so dear. She has left us graciously, just the way she lived, majestically, I would say. She knew she had reached the end and was not afraid to face it, to talk about it, to make it present. I'm sure that for you, it must have been tough seeing her through this long and painful journey, but you did it with much patience, tenderness, and unconditional love, and that is a true blessing. I, Amalia, cherish her being part of my life and know that she will remain so. But right now it's painful and a bit scary too. We send hugs and love to you from Olga, Amalia, Yashi, Dafi, and all of the children.
Thank you all for those beautiful words of tribute. And allowing us to have a sense of the depth of your family in this way. At this time, I'd like to invite everyone, if you're comfortable doing so, to rise for the memorial prayer. Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamtzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina B'ma'alot Kedoshim Utehorim Kezohar Harakia Mazhirim Et Nishmat Leah Bat Shulam Ulmalka Shehalcha Leolama Ana Baal Harachamim Hastireha Beseter Knafecha Leolamim Utzror Bitzror HaChayim Et Nishmata Adonai Hu Nachalata V'tanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkava V'nomar Amen. divine source of mercy, dwelling in the heavens' heights and in the depths of our hearts, bring proper rest beneath the wings of your divine presence, amid the ranks of the holy and the pure, illuminating like the brilliance of the skies the soul of Lelia Kamionkowski, who has gone to her eternal place of rest. May you, who are the source of mercy, shelter her beneath your wings eternally and bind her soul among the living, that she may rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. Please be seated. So, I apologize. I forgot to pick up the card that has the information. I think I know exactly when the Shiva times are taking place, though, so I can do that. Today, immediately following... thank you. Thanks. So today, immediately following the burial, Shiva will begin at Judson Manor, starting approximately at 5 o'clock and running until 8. There will be a Shiva Minyan at 6:30. And then tomorrow and Wednesday, Shiva visitation will take place between 2 and 4 p.m. and 6 and 8 p.m. on each day, with the Shiva Minyan taking place at 6:30 on both of those days as well. And donations in Leia's memory, the family has requested may be made to Kol Halev, and I feel like there was a second option too, but I may be misremembering. Okay, no, okay. The Reconstructing Judaism. Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Yeah.
Francis will conclude services here at the chapel. We ask those of you driving to the cemetery to start your cars,